Assalamu alaikum, my name is Faisal and these are my group members, and today our topic is Android services. A service is basically a component that runs in the background without the need of the interaction of the user, and it works even if the application is terminated. There are two states of a service: started and bound. In started, a service is started when an application component such as an activity starts by calling the start service. Once this is done, a service can run in the background indefinitely even if the component that started it was destroyed. Bound: a service is bound when the application calls bind service. A bound service gives an interface which is basically a client-service interface that allows components to interact with the service, send requests, get results, and do so across processes with the inter-process communication, which is also known as the IPC. Types of service: foreground. In foreground service, there are some operations that are performed that are noticeable to the users. For example, an audio app would use this foreground service to play an audio track. A notification must be displayed by the foreground service. A foreground service continues to run even if the user isn't interacting with the app. Background: a background service performs an operation which not necessarily noticed by the user. Example: if an app uses a service to compact its storage, this would usually be a compact storage. Thank you.
Okay, my name is Talasham, and we are going to discuss about the diagram or the flow charts of these two services. The first one is unbound services. The service is going to start by the start services method, and the flows goes to comes to then on create method, and then it goes to the on start method. So the service are going to running until we actually call the stop service self method. This service will continue to execute and the process the entire background it is performing. After we call the stop service method, it comes to the on destroy method. If there is anything going to run, they are now going to stop and this service are going to shut down. So now the bonder service. So service is created by the bind service and the flows goes to the on create method, but it is executed on the calling of the bind service, and the flows passes to the on bind services and on bind service, and in return I binded object. This I binded object is used for the communication purpose. After this, when all the clients are disconnected, the flows come to the unbind, and of any chance bind service is called, then it goes to the rebind and the communication going to be started. And if there is no communication or anything of or should we say the request, so the process comes to the unbind from where it goes to the on destroy, and the process are going to shut down. So basically these are the most similar services. In the first services we have to stop it and they are going to destroy, and the other services there is some client who are going to be interact with it. So we should say these are the components simply working together without a UI. So now we are going to talk about the Android service lifecycle. The service basic class define various callback methods. You don't need to implement all callback method. However, it is important that you understand each one and implement those that ensure your app behaves the way user expect. And the most important are as follow: on start command, this system call this method when other components such as an activity request there the service are started by calling start service. If you implement this method, it is your responsibility to stop the services when it work is done by calling stop self or stop service method on bind. This system call this method when other component wants to bind with the service by calling bind service. If you implement this method, you must provide interface the client used to communicate with the services by returning an iBinder object. You must implement this method, but if you don't want to allow binding, then you should return null. Un- on unbind, the system call this method when all client have connected from a particular interface published by the service. on rebind. The system calls this method when new clients have connected to the service after it previously been notified that all had disconnected in its unbinded intent. On create, the system calls this method when the service is first created using onStart command or onBind. The call is required to perform one-time setup. On destroy, the system calls this method when the service is no longer used and is being destroyed. Your service should implement this to clean up any resources such as thread, register, listener, receiver, etc. So now Mr. Sikandar Khan are going to present his part of the presentation. Thank you.
Assalamualaikum, my name is Sikandar. I am going to present the following skeleton services demonstrates each of the life cycle of methods that we discussed in previous. Indicates how to behave if the service is killed. If service is killed, destroy its mstart mode interface for client that binder called indicates whether a bind should be used, boolean, mul or rebind. Call when the services is being created. When user is want to create the bind function, then override public void on create. This is the function that we create. The service is starting due to call to service start service. When service is start, bind method is created, then this method is used. A client is being to use the service with bind service, public in binder on bind intent return binder over. This is the override function. A client is being to use to the services with bind service called when all clients have unbound with unbind services. This is use all call when all clients have unbound with unbind services. This is another function, boolean function. Boolean function return true or false. The client called when a client is binding to the services with bind service. This function is called when the client is binding to the services with bind services. On bind intent call when the services is no longer used and is being destroyed. When user want to destroy this function, public void on destroy, this method is used. Now main activity.java. This is the main activity in Java that we know. String message Android call when the activity is first created. Then when we use to create the first activity, public void on create. This is another function that create function on bundle save instruction states. The on create event, this is an event created, that is the on create function. Public void start services we have view. No, my services dot java. Important android.app services created by tutorial.77. The public class, this is the class extend services. Public int on start command, this is the command service started to make text. This service started to state light on long dot show. Override public void on destroy, this is the destroy function. If you want to destroy, this destroy function is used no longer. Super dot on destroy toast make text base services destroy toast. Android manifest dot xml. This is another application true. Android icon launcher app string name true. Then the main activity Android intent action main Android intent category launcher. This is the launcher that we know. The service Android name my services. Yes, this is the my services Android name and the main face. The resolution layout and activity diagram. This is the text view 1 warp content that we know height width. Example of services align parent top true yes, and the text size is 30 dp. The text view is same warp content tutorial point. This is the text view color. Yes, this is the text view color code. The size text size is 30 dp. The image button true and the margin button is 40 dp. Now the image button, this is the same like previous text view. Warp content image button drawable ABC. This is the drawable because where we use drawable when we use a color or resolutions or etc. Content variable is true, content horizontal is true. Now the button is warp content and button 2. This is ID is button 2. The start services, the layout, image button, center horizontal true. The button, this is a DP button, DP button 2 services, button 2 and ID. And the output, example of services, tutorial point, start services, stop services, and example of services. Tutorial point, start, and services started. Thank you so much.